Hello and welcome back to the Scenario 7 podcast. My name is Sam, and this week we're bringing you something a bit different. We've been gone for a few months after the Formula One season ended, but we're going over to the electric Formula this time because in less than a week, the Formula E season starts again, season 8, and it's going to be very exciting this year. So to help me preview it, I've brought in a bit of an expert. It's Mr. Jack Pickering, who's a contributor to Formula E Zone. Jack, how are you doing, mate?
Good mate. It's a good to speak to you again. It's been a while, but yeah, I'm really looking forward to the season of Formula E. Yeah, I think motorsport needs that calm down after what happened in Formula One. I don't want to mention it. But yeah, now that Formula E started, we've got something to look forward to, something to talk about again. So yeah, looking forward to it.
Yeah, it's certainly going to be epic. Oh yeah, the moment that you don't want to talk about. Yeah, it's good that gets brushed under the rug and we start off fresh in 2022. But yeah, as I said, we're bringing you a season 8 preview Formula E. So let me first go into the details of it. So this season, there's going to be 16 races in 10 different countries, starting in Diriyah on the 28th of January and finishing Seoul on the 14th of August. There's 3 new races for 2022. There's Jakarta, Vancouver, and Seoul Prix. And there's a new qualifying format, which, Jack, I know you're very excited about. Let me just quickly explain it. So it's very similar to what you'd see in the Football World Cup. It's kind of you start with a group stage and you see 2 groups of 11 drivers ordered based on World Championship positioning, battling to set lap times in a 10-minute session, with the fastest 4 from each progressing into the dual stage. Those 8 will then face off in the quarterfinals, competing against each other in head-to-head in a knockout format before progressing into the semi-finals and final. The winning driver of the final duel takes the duelist pole position, while the runner-up lines up in second. The semi-finalists will take up 3rd and 4th, the quarter-finalists between 5th and 8th, according to their lap times. And then the rest of the drivers in the grid will basically be set depending on lap time. And it's a very interesting one. I don't think any formula's done anything like it. Jack, you're very excited. What do you think about this new format?
Yeah, so this is a brand new Formula E. I think Formula E needed it. There was a lot of because we went into the end of last season, we had 18 different drivers of the 24 on the grid, still having a chance to win the championship going into that final round in Berlin, which it did feel like a bit too much. And so heading into this season, we needed this new qualifying format. There was actually, from what I've heard, it was Sam Bird, the Jaguar driver's idea. He put it to the bosses that be at Formula E, and then they've I think they've tweaked it around, and then they've produced us with this. And yeah, I think it's a brilliant format. They did do some testing of it in Valencia as well, so that they're not going completely blind into it in Diriyah. And yeah, I think this is the right way to go, because last season it was no one wants to be in Group 1 because they're going to have the worst track conditions, and so this is a lot fairer, and yeah, it makes a lot more sense for Formula E to go down this route. I am looking forward to it. It starts kind of IndyCar style, so yeah, the 2 groups. So it's 1, 3, 5, 7, 9, etc. in the championship in the first group, then 2, 4, 6, 8, etc. in the second group, and then the top 4 from each, they'll they'll progress into the dual stages, which yeah, it's reminiscent of the Football World Cup, which I'll be honest, this will be my World Cup this year, because having it in November and December makes no sense to me. But yeah, I think it's going to be an interesting one. But I think even though we've got this thing where where the qualifying format isn't as unfair, so we'll have like the quicker teams towards the front as per usual. I still think it's going to be as unpredictable as ever. I still think there'll be some shocks in the qualifying, and and we've seen it. So in Valencia, basically there were a few, because it was done on the Monday. Then we had all the press conferences after, where the driver spoke about it. Robin Frines, the Envision driver, he was complaining how the two cars were too close to each other. So they've done some changes. So it's not 10 seconds between the car now. It's something more like 30. So that they don't get the dirty air or just gain from the track being swept up by the guy in front. So in that regard, it's going to be good. And yeah, I think it's still going to be really, really exciting come Diriyah.
Yeah, it's good that they're listening to driver feedback in order to tweak it. Do you think that if it proves to be a massive success in Formula E, that other formulas perhaps could take it up, or do you think that it's kind of perfect for Formula E and it should just stick with Formula E?
Well, I don't see it going to Formula One at any time soon, because we've tried changing the qualifying format for Formula One on a few too many occasions, and it's been dreadful. I think in terms of Formula E, I think it's perfect for Formula E. I could see Formula 2 potentially doing it, because they do something similar in Monaco, where they split the groups in two, and then that's how they decide how the grid's done with Group A and Group B. It could again in IndyCar, the first segment is very similar to that, so they could change the qualifying format in IndyCar to something similar. But apart from that, I don't really see it going really anywhere else outside of Formula E.
Yeah, it's going to be very interesting. Now, before we move into each individual team and how you think they'll do, we had some big teams dropping out after last season. That's Audi Sport and BMW leaving, and then the news that Mercedes are going to pull out after this season. What are your thoughts on that? Is this a bit? It certainly looks like a big loss for Formula E, but do you think that it could have quite detrimental effects?
Yeah, so Audi, I think losing Audi was a massive one, because they have been in the sport since day dot. They won the very first Formula E race in Beijing with Lucas di Grassi. So they've always been there. And so to lose Audi, I think that was a massive kick in the teeth for Formula E. To lose BMW, I think that was still a bit that wasn't ideal, but I don't think it was as damaging, because with Audi we've lost the entire team, so we're now down to 22 runners for this season. With BMW, they were partnered with the Andretti squad, and so Andretti have continued, and they will continue going on into the future. Whereas, we have lost Audi. Mercedes, we're going to lose at the end of the season, which is a shame. They've only been in for 3 years, just like a BMW were, and then they're going to call it quits. However, we did get the news a couple of weeks ago that Maserati are going to come in for season 9, which I'm very much looking forward to. They're not going to be a proper factory entity for the first season. They're going to team up with their partners at DS, and then from season 10 onwards, they're then going to look at becoming a factory team, and I think it's kind of like swings and roundabouts. You have like engine suppliers come and go, in all sorts of sports. Like Formula One have just lost Honda. Like you will see other sports, just like other motor racing sports, lose things but gain in return. I think the fact that we've got Maserati on board is a huge plus, but I think it's just disappointing that we're losing 3 manufacturers in the space of 2 years. Yeah.
Yeah. Now you did mention Andretti there, and let's get on to talking about each team, starting with Avalanche Andretti, of course, previously BMW I Andretti Motorsport, and they've got a good. They've got an interesting lineup. So they've got Jake Dennis going into his second season after a superb rookie season, finishing third, and they've got Oliver Askew, who's first rookie out of three. We're going to talk about American IndyCar driver and former Indy Lights champion. How do you think they're shaping up going into the season?
The big thing with Andretti is that over the past few years, with the BMW ties attached to it, they've been a team that's always been up there. So in the first season, they were championship contenders with Antonio Felix da Costa. In the second season, they had Max Gunter up there, and Alex Sims won a couple races as well. And then last season, Jake Dennis, he came in, he was very quiet for the first couple of races, but then Valencia came along, admittedly, and Jake's even admitted, even though everyone in the paddock hated the qualifying format, he's admitted that he benefited from that in Valencia, because he was still in Group 4 in that progressively drying qualifying that we had for that race, which meant he stuck it on pole, and he won. But from then onwards, he was superb. If you started the championship at round 6 when he got his first win, he only got his first points in Formula E the day before in that fiasco of a race in Valencia. And so yeah, if you started that then, you would have been away with the championship. Like, he would have won it with a race to go or something. So I think he's such talent. He is going to drive Andretti forward this season. And also, what's worth pointing out, they've still got the BMW Powertrain, because we're in this 2-year cycle now. So everyone who used it, all the powertrains being carried over. However, in terms of like the software, the teams that are still in, they've got factory engineers who can update the software and try and make their cars quicker. But all the hardware is completely the same for this season. So they could still be there or thereabout. From what I saw in testing, like, I could see a couple dual appearances in for the qualifying format. I don't think that I can't see Andretti being right up there where they've been the last couple of years, but they'll still be there or thereabout, which is all right for them.
Yeah. Now let's have a look at the Dragon Penske Autosport team. They had a season of, well, definitely improvement from season 6 anyway. They scored more points in the opening 2 rounds of last season than the whole of the season before. And they're coming into it with an interesting driver lineup. You've got Sergio Sette Camara, who's staying on for another season at Dragon Penske, of course, Formula 2 winner. And the other driver is one that I've talked about on this podcast a few times, saying he gets a lot of stick, and I don't think it's always justified. He is the second rookie in here, and that's Antonio Giovinazzi. He comes in with 3 years of Formula 1 under his belt, and I thought he was quite underrated and had very good qualifying pace in Formula 1 for the car he was in, and it'll be interesting to see if he can carry that over. And it's quite an interesting one that Sergio Sette Camara actually raced against Giovinazzi in Formula 3 in 2015, and now they're teammates. That's an interesting one. How do you think this team will do? Will they carry on this progress from last season? And with Giovinazzi, that's quite a pull for the team.
Well, yeah, definitely. I think the biggest story was that Giovinazzi, he was announced within 2 hours of Guan Yu Zhou being announced for the as his replacement at Alfa Romeo. So he definitely did not mess about in getting himself signed up. With Dragon, Dragon is a team that since the very start, they finished second in the first season of Formula E. They've been progressively just like going down. So for last season, they got a podium with Nico Muller in that horrific race in Valencia that we all try and forget. Rubbish. But yeah, they did have a terrific start to the season in Diriyah, where they looked quick in testing last season. They were second and fourth, I think, in testing, and then they came to Diriyah, and arguably they should have been in Super Pole on both days. That's how good they were on opening day, and they even brought their powertrain a little bit later on, so that hopefully that would give them the boost heading into the latter half of the season. It didn't really work out that way, and the fact that Nico Muller split with the team and they brought in Joel Eriksson for the rest of the season, I think that didn't help, just to have to have someone just vaulted in halfway through the year. But this season they've got Antonio Giovinazzi, which is, I think, it's brilliant for Formula E. I think it's fantastic for Dragon, but I can't see them doing as I can't see them doing as well as last year. But I think their aim needs to be, they need to pick up a couple points over the course of the season, I think. And the fact that Giovinazzi missed his last day of testing because he had to jet off to Jeddah to compete in the penultimate round of the Formula One season last year. So yeah, I think it'll be an upwards learning curve for Giovinazzi. It will be a couple races before he finds his feet. But if he can get nearer to the points towards the midway part of the season through to the end of the season, I think that'll be a successful season for him. And for Dragon, I think keeping themselves ahead of Neo, I think that's got to be the aim for this season.
So basically, just don't come last. It is really the aim. Let's move on to DS Techeetah. They were the season 5 and 6 champions, so they've got some pedigree of winning, and they've got a very good driver lineup. If you're looking at success in Formula E. So first of all, they've got Antonio Felix da Costa, who is the season 6 world champion, and then they've got Jean-Eric Vergne, who is the only driver in Formula E to have 2 world titles from season 4 and 5. So that's a very competitive driver lineup for DS Techeetah. How do you think they'll do?
Well, yeah, DS Techeetah, I think it was partly because of the qualifying format, and so whenever they do well, they get stuck in the back. But they weren't really anywhere last season, and actually heading into that final race in Berlin, when they locked out the front row on the Saturday, we thought, oh right, this is one and done for them. They're gonna bolt into the distance. They're gonna do it, and they fell back through the pack. So I think Techeetah, they've had to learn over the course of the last year or so that they aren't the all-dominating force that we thought they were in season 6, because obviously season 6 that was interrupted by the COVID pandemic, and we had the 6th race Berlin season finale where Da Costa dominated. He was so good, and the caliber of those 2 drivers is impeccable. Now they've had a bit of funding issues over the course of the off season. However, it's looking like they've sorted that out. And from what I saw in pre-season testing, they are one of the big teams that, yeah, they're definitely going to do well, and they're going to definitely be fighting for the title this season.
Yeah, it should be exciting for that team, especially with that driver lineup. Let's move on to Envision Racing. They were 5th in season 7, and they've got a driver lineup of Robin Freins, who is the newly crowned 2021 World Endurance Champion. So he's coming into the season with a bit of momentum. And they've got Nick Cassidy, who is a Japanese Triple Crown winner, entering into his 2nd Formula E season. How do you think Envision are going to do?
Well, they are the team. They are the underdog team. They are, if you want to support an underdog team in Formula E, it's support Envision. They've dropped the Virgin branding now for this season, and they look like they're in their traditional spot of there or thereabout. They actually went without a win last season. It was the first time that they didn't. After they lost their star driver because Sam Bird, because he went over to Jaguar last season. But Robin Friends he was constantly there week in, week out. When he was qualifying down the order in 17th or something, he'd always find his way up to 5th. And so I think that he's got the car underneath him to potentially go for the championship this year. And also Nick Cassidy, he was a rookie last year, but he had such a stellar rookie season. He put it on pole in Rome. He got a podium in Mexico City and I think in New York as well. He's just been so good in terms of pace that I reckon that he will be there or thereabout. He'll be fighting for the podiums this season. Envision, I don't think that they'll win either title or anything, but they're going to be there or thereabout fighting for the top spots, as is custom with the team now.
Yeah, so you hear that if you're looking for an underdog team and you're starting to get into Formula E, Envision Racing, they are the team to follow. Now let's move on to Mahindra, and they're a team who are sporting an all-British lineup. First of all, they've got Alexander Sims, who's entering into a second season at the team, and I think his main competitor this season will be his teammate potentially. So that's Oliver Rowland, who is joined from a Nissan Edams, who I think it's fair to say is a qualifying specialist. And he returns to the team after leaving in season 3. So it's an interesting dynamic there. He left and came back, and he's come back again for this season. How do you think Mahindra are going to do?
So yes, Oliver Rowland has joined Mahindra. However, it does go further back because in season 2, Nick Heidfeld damaged his wrist in, I think, Putrajaya, and so Oliver Rowland, he was the standby reserve. He was the reserve driver throughout that time at Mahindra Racing, and so he stood in for Punta del Este, and that was his one and only race in Formula E until he got drafted in by Nissan in season 5 to replace some bloke called Alexander Albon. I'm not sure if you've heard of him, but Ollie got his Formula E break in season 5, and he's been fantastic. He's been fantastic for Nissan Edams, and he's been, even though Sebastian Buemi was that team leader at Nissan Edams, Oliver Rowland kind of took on that reign after Buemi had a horrible season last year. Nissan kind of lost their star driver to Mahindra because Nissan weren't willing to pay the same level to Ollie that they were to Seb Buemi, which I find quite interesting. But Mahindra, it's a massive steal for them. I think it will be I think it's a fantastic signing for them. They've been there or thereabout. They haven't had a great last couple of years, but it looks like that they'll be fighting there or thereabout for like the points, like the standard Mahindra effort, I think, this season. But yeah, I think Mahindra, I don't think that they're going to be they're going to be dark horse. They might get the odd podium here and there, but I think for them, if they get constant points over the season, that'll be a good season for them.
Now, moving on to the season 7 champions. So these are the team that are going to try and go for 2 seasons in a row. Mercedes EQ. Last season in the sport, are they going to go out with a bang? Their driver lineup looks very impressive. They got Stoffel Van Dorn, who had 2 seasons in F1 with McLaren, and he came second in season 6. And I think it's fair to say in season 7, he could have potentially been up there. He was very unlucky on numerous occasions. And then his teammate, Nick De Vries, who is the reigning world champion in Formula E, going into his 3rd season. So winning it in only his 2nd season is very impressive. And these are two drivers that could really propel Mercedes EQ to the top. But do you think that they're going to retain it and be as good this year?
Mercedes were looking very quick in testing. I will say that for sure. I think, I'm in complete agreement that Stoff, had it not been for instance, so like when he was taken out by Roland in London last year, he would have been right in that championship hunt as well. But towards the end of it, he kind of faded, but remained a team player so that Nick could go on and become champion. I think that they've got the recipe for success. Like last year, Nick, after he won the title, he did kind of say, "Oh, this is amazing," but it does feel a bit like I've won the lottery. In terms of like it wasn't exactly name picked out of a hat last season, but it wasn't as kind of like one-sided the championship thing, because we went into that last race with 18 drivers thinking that they could win it, and so yeah, I think it's going to be tough for them this season, but I think that if I think they've got to be the favourites because they have the momentum, they've got the drivers, they've got the powertrain, they've got the team behind it. Team Brackley could go on and do the double.
Representing Northamptonshire, you gotta support them really. Let's move on to we're going to go from top to bottom. Let's move on to Neo 333 Racing. 11th in season 7, a very disappointing season. Their driver lineup: Oliver Turvey, 1 podium in 8 years in Formula E, and then they've got Dan Ticktum, who is probably, in my opinion, anyway, going to be the most interesting driver this season. He's the third and final rookie we're going to mention, and he's a 2-time Macau winner. He comes over from Formula 2. He is surrounded by controversy wherever he goes, whether that's on the track or off the track. But he's a great driver. I think that's first and foremost. He is a very good driver. So it'll be interesting. How do you think Neo and their 2 drivers will do?
I would say I have so much love for the Neo team. They are a great bunch of guys, and so yeah, and it does pain to see them this low. In a couple of seasons ago, they were the first ever team to get nil points at the end of the championship. So yeah, I was delighted that they got points straight out of the bat in Diriyah last year. However, it's looking like it's going to be similar, unfortunately. I think you said Ollie's only had Oliver Turvey. He's only had one podium in 8 years. I don't think that tells the whole story though, because the amount of qualifying performances that he has done in that car that got 0 points at the end of the season. He did a fantastic qualifying in Santiago that year. They got him into Superpole. He was in a car that had a 1-year-old Dragon powertrain in the back of it, and he got that into Superpole. It's constantly said that Oliver Turvey is the most underrated driver in Formula E, and the fact that we got this new qualifying format now, I do feel a bit gutted about it, because we can't see his qualifying prowess, because that is where Oliver Turvey was so good in the past few seasons. I still think that the team can manage a couple of points. Dan Ticktum's coming in this year. I also have a lot of love for Dan Ticktum. I genuinely think he's a good driver, and I think he's a street circuit specialist as well. He's won 2 Macau Grand Prix, for goodness sake. And whenever you saw him in the Formula 2 races on the street circuits, he was so good. He was so good around, I think it was Monaco last year. He got in on the podium in Baku, I think, as well. I think he is going to be one to watch. But the fact that he missed a day of testing, because he also had to head off to Jeddah for the Formula 2. And so it will be a learning season for him. but he has said himself, if he can get a couple points finishes here and there, then that will be a brilliant season for him, because unfortunately that's where the car is at, and that's that, unfortunately.
Yeah, it is a shame, but an interesting driver lineup that could provide some surprises, hopefully. Now, let's look at Nissan Edam's most successful team in Formula E, season 1 to 3 champions. They're lining up with Maximilian Gunter, who is one of the most promising drivers on the grid, puts in several very good performances, and Sebastian Buemi, who has the most wins in Formula E with 13. He's the season 2 champion, multiple Le Mans and endurance championship titles. So it's going to be interesting with Gunter, a promising driver, against the experience of Sebastian Buemi, who's done so well in this. How do you think Nissan are going to do?
I think the main story for this season is we need to see what the redemption of Sebastian Buemi is because last season, I think, can be described nothing short of an absolute shocker for him. As you said, he is the guy who has won most races in Formula E. He was in championship contention in seasons 1, 2, and 3. He arguably should have been a 3-time Formula E champion. And he scored less than a race win's worth of points last season. It was a shock to the system, really. And so I think the main thing that we need to see from Seb Buemi this year, he needs to be back up there. Yes, I think he finished 4th in London before getting disqualified. So he didn't. Luck wasn't on his side on a few occasions last year. But even then, we didn't see the Sebastian Buemi that we know and love. And so that's what he needs to bring this year. He needs to bring back his A game, or I think at the end of the season we might be saying goodbye to him from Formula E. He might just focus on Toyota efforts or something like that. In terms of Max Gunter, now he needs to prove himself. Obviously, Buemi needs to prove himself this season, but so does Max Gunter, because last year he was beaten comprehensively by his teammate Jake Dennis at the Andretti squad, and so yeah, he needs to show that he can be the number 1 driver and that he's good enough of a replacement of Oliver Rowland, who was scoring 90% of the points last season for that team. I think for them it's going to be a difficult one. From testing, it looked like that they were in and around, that they have potential to do a time inside the top 10 or top 5, but by the end of the day, their times had shuffled down the order, and so even when they did representative times, it wasn't looking good. I want to say Nissan Edams will be fighting Mahindra or something this season, but I'm not even that confident on that at this point.
Oh, it's going to be interesting. Hopefully, the Sebastian Buemi of old comes out to fight next season. Let's move on to Jaguar TCS Racing, who I'll go on to talk about it in a sec. But one of their drivers didn't have a great time last season in the last race. They were second last season. They have Sam Bird. He's not the driver I was talking about, but they have Sam Bird, who is the only driver to win a race in every year of Formula E. So very impressive. And I'm not going to lie, when I think of Formula E, I do first think of Sam Bird. I'm not sure why, but just because of that British driver, very consistent, and I really like Sam Bird. And then his teammate, of course, Mitch Evans, who had his title hopes destroyed when his car didn't get off the line in the last race. And I was watching that. I was watching the final race, and before I was going, yeah, this is Mitch Evans' title. He's won it. and then disaster. And I'm really happy that De Vries won, but I are so gutted for Mitch Evans. But yeah, how do you think Mitch and the Jaguar team are going to get on this season?
Yeah, so uh, as you said, in the final race of that season of last season, Mitch Evans didn't move. Now here's a little nugget from Formula E testing. They did a test race. So they did a 45-minute test race, but because we got the new regs for this season, we got added time instead of reduction of power underneath the virtual safety car and safety car. Yeah, so I think it was Bird who lined up on pole. Evans was fifth. The lights went out and neither Jaguar moved, and everyone in the media center was like, Berlin. It was like it really was shades of Berlin. But yeah, fingers crossed that doesn't happen again. I really hope that doesn't happen again for the Jaguar team, because genuinely, for me, this is the strongest lineup in Formula E. You have the guy who has won most. You've got the guy who has won in every single season of Formula E, and you've got somewhat even. I'll be honest, it confuses me that Mitch Evans has only won 2 races in his entire Formula E career. It feels like he's won so much more, but these two, I think, together, they work well. They're both right at the top of their game at the moment. So they've got to aim for the championship. Who knows if Sandberg can get the advantage over him creating the new qualifying format? But yeah, I think regardless, I think if Jaguar don't win this championship this year, it'll be a bit of a disappointment for them, because they've been there or thereabout for the last couple of years now.
Yeah, let's hope come Dira that the cars actually get off the line and we don't have a repeat of Berlin, because hearing that happen in testing as well, that is worrying. Only could happen with Jaguar. Let's move on to Rocket Venturi Racing, who had their best season in season 7 with 5 podiums and 2 wins. They've got a drive lineup of Lucas Di Grassi, the season 3 world champion, and holds the record for the most podiums in the sport with 35. And then they've got Eduardo Montara, who came second last season. So from the looks of it, a strong lineup. How do you think Rocket Venturi are going to get on?
If you're a betting man, there might be some good odds on this for them to win either title. Genuinely, this is, and I'll be honest, it always surprises me to hear that last season was Venturi's best season, because like they always used to be there or thereabout, but I never pictured them. I always pictured them. I thought once or twice that they'd finished higher than 7th in the championship, but they haven't, which makes something that I'm about to say sound very crazy, and I'm going to say that they're going to finish top 3 in the championship, because that is a stellar lineup. They came oh so close last year with Edo Mortara. They've got Lucas Di Grassi now in that second seat. Yeah, I mean, like, Di Grassi could win the championship this season with Venturi. Mortara could win the championship this season with Venturi. Do I think it's going to happen? Not sure, but yeah, that is a stellar lineup. It's the best lineup that Venturi's ever had, and they're going to come out of it this season with wins, with poles, with podiums, and etc. And also from testing, when they trialed the qualifying format, Lucas Di Grassi topped Group 2 and Edo Mortara topped Group 1. So they were the quickest people when they did the first go at testing the qualifying format back in Valencia. So yeah, I'm looking very, very positively at them this season, and I think that they'll be there or thereabout for the title.
That is a hot take right there. I mean, they've had some staff changes in the off season, and of course, I'm pretty sure Susie Wolf, wife of Toto Wolf, is with Rocket Venturi, I think. Yeah, so they've got that winning mentality, and I think they're the only other team with the Mercedes engine in the car. So they have the powertrain from the winning team last season. So it could end up being very promising. Exciting times for Rocket Venturi. Now, coming into the last team, and that is the Porsche Formula E team, the only team on the grid to have 0 wins in Formula E. Not the title that I'm sure they want to have. They line up with Andre Lottera, a 3-time Le Mans winner, and Pascal Wehrlein, a man I did really like in Formula One, to be honest, but he only stayed there for 2 seasons, but does have 2 podiums in Formula E. So final team, Porsche, how do you think they're going to get on?
I'll be honest. I'm just thinking, because I'll be honest. My first thought was, no, Neo haven't won a race, but then I remember that they won the first championship with Nelson Piquet. Yeah, no, they are. They genuinely are the only team that haven't won a race.
Yeah,
That's insane. I hadn't thought about that whatsoever. Well, arguably they won in Mexico last year, and then that was stripped from Pascal Wehrlein, which was unfair. It's because they didn't declare the tyres properly. Which, I mean, it's a technicality. I'm hoping that going forward that these issues resolve, but it's because of the pressure of the Formula E environment, that because everything's packed into one day, the practice, qualifying and the race, it means that they're trying to cram, like when they're used to Formula One, the 3 days worth of things that they have to do into this one single day, and so like human errors are more and more likely to happen, which was a shame in the case of Pascal Wehrlein last year. They are a team that I think will be fighting for points. They'll have the odd podium. They might be challenging for a win. Pascal Wehrlein he is a brilliant qualifier, and so I think he'll be there. I think he'll have a few flash moments here and there. Andre Lottera, I think he's done a great job in leading that team. I don't see him being there for that many more seasons. But I didn't think he had a stellar season last year. I think he's got something more to prove coming into this year as well. Not as much as we've spoken about Seb Buemi, but I think that Andre, that he does need to deliver a few better results this year, because last year, with the exception of a second in Valencia, I think he didn't really score that well at all, and was involved in a few too many accidents, I think. But the Porsche team, if they can mix it with like the top 6 in the championship, then that'll be a solid season for them once again.
Well, that is all the teams gone through, and some great analysis from you there. But now it's time for you to put your money where your mouth is, and I need you to give us. Should we start with the constructors? Who do you think in season 8 of Formula E is going to win the constructors title? Will Mercedes get it again, or will someone else come in?
Right, I'm going to pad my answer out, because what I think that this season will be, it will be season 7, but season 7 part 2, because we've got the carryover of the powertrains, but we've got this different qualifying format. We've got this extra time instead of energy reduction, so it's going to be the same but different, and so there will be a few outcomes that will be slightly different to what we saw in season 7. I'd say that, right, so from testing, I'm going to name 4 teams now. Tcs Racing, Rocket Venturi, Mercedes, and who else was lightning quick? I forgot. Jaguar. So those four teams were up there, and so I think that they are the 4 that will be fighting for the champion. It's going to be one of those 4. Out of those 4, I am going to put my neck on the line and say Jaguar. I'm going to say Jaguar. I think it's because of the combination of drivers. Like, even though all those teams have stellar lineups, I do think that the combination of Bird and Evans, they do take it just.
Oh, that it's interesting. So if Jaguar get off the line, you're predicting Jaguar to win the constructors. I'm gonna keep making jokes about it. I'm sorry, it was just too funny. Now, moving
James
on.
Barkley's going to be having words shortly.
It's fine. It's fine. Hopefully, but yeah, let's move on to the driver's title. There are a few contenders. We've got the new qualifying. We've got, so potentially a few good people who are great in qualifying last year might not be this year. There's a few new variables, but you've predicted Jaguar to win the constructors. Does that mean that a Jaguar driver is going to win the drivers? Who have you got?
I'm going to duplicate exactly what I've just said and say there are too many drivers who are going to be fighting for this championship. I genuinely think that when we get to Seoul in August, there will still be 7 or 8 people in the hunt. And for me, I think 7 or 8 is the perfect number. 18 was far too much. You don't want someone who's 18th in the championship suddenly become champion at the end of the weekend. But if you're like 7th or 8th and they've made their way to win the championship, I'm kind of okay with that. But yeah, I am going to say that the bridesmaid will break his curse, and that Sam Bird, I think, will finally become the Formula E champion, because he's come so close on so many occasions. So I think it's time for him to win at least one title.
Yeah, he definitely deserves one for the amount of times, as you said, he's come so close, and he is the one that I think of when I think of Formula E. So it'd be great, and a British driver winning it would be awesome. It really would be.
I would say that Sam Bird is probably like 90% of people's predictions going into every season for the last 5 years or something. So I mean, I don't. My opinion means nothing. So yeah.
It will certainly be interesting, but with Formula E, it really could be a lot of people on this grid.
Yeah, yeah, definitely.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. But yeah, I think that wraps up this Formula E Season 8 preview. Jack, you've given some great analysis, and we really appreciate your time. So thank you for coming on, mate.
Thank you very much. Cheers.
And yeah, remember to like, subscribe, download, whatever you need to do just to interact with this content. Let us know if you like us covering some Formula E stuff. We'll probably get Jack back on again for a review or a mid-season stuff, because mate, you gave some great insight. I hope that's all right with you.
I'll have a bit more analysis by then. I will have found out some things inside the paddock, fingers crossed. So yeah.
Exactly. He's the man who is going to know everything about Formula E by the end of the season. So hopefully when we come to do a post-season review, then you can add some more insight there. But yeah, thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. And we'll see you in the next one. Cheers.